I love that all these D-bags are getting exposed. The nice guys. I'm sure you've already heard about this, but Jimmy Fallon exposed as a D-bag. Of course, he's already tried to apologize. You know, if you haven't heard, he treated his staff so terribly. He's drunk all the time on set. He's like the classic king baby that everyone has to walk on eggshells around. If Jimmy has a bad day, everybody has a bad day. Jimmy has a good day, you can relax, but not really, because you know anything can set someone like this off, right? So many men in Hollywood are like this. I say this because we all know this by now, right? But also as someone, I worked on sets for a long time. I was, a PA at first, which is the people who get treated the absolute worst. No protection, no union, nothing. Then I worked my way up the ranks. I did craft services, set dressing, props. I was in Video Village with all of the genius men, and they're mostly a bunch of D-bags and egomaniacs. Put your life in danger constantly. And if there weren't unions to protect these crews at all, we would have death constantly. But because there are unions, there's some protection, but they still exploit all of them, including the writers of these shows. So, which is why they're on strike. But they had crying rooms, right? I mean, everybody knows what it's like, hopefully. I mean, sure, not hopefully. Not hopefully. But I'm sure everyone has had a terrible boss. And working for a terrible boss is like having a terrible daddy, right? They are it's the ranking system. It's if dad's having a bad day, I'm going to sit in my chair, I'm going to drink, and I'm going to brood and pout if I'm not physically violent. And I'm going to make sure everybody else knows that I'm the one in power and my mood dominates everything. And it sounds like this is what this show was like. The fact that they had a new showrunner every year. That's a huge deal. That doesn't happen. Showrunners are the people who, they're in charge of all the writers. They're the person between the head people and the writers. And they're like, fork this, I'm gone. Or we're absolutely abusive themselves because of the, top-down approach. Look at this. This cute, adorable Jimmy, this childlike Jimmy, the little king baby. His apology, it's embarrassing. Oh, your first thing is that you're embarrassed. You're embarrassed you're embarrassed because you were exposed to be abusive and a prick. And I feel so bad. Sorry if I embarrassed you and your family and your friends. No, you didn't embarrass them. You abused them. I want the show to be fun, right? Because just like Ashton Kutcher and all these other D-bags who are nice guys and goofballs and little pranksters, it's all jokes. It should be inclusive for everybody. It should be funny. It should be the best show. I don't even care. I don't even care about this dude's apology. Because this guy has been doing what so many of us have fallen for. The adorkable man who is actually a terrifying person, but hides behind this innocent, fumbling, when in fact, they are power hungry, insecure, and terrorize other people with their moods. A lot of the people that I grew up with in the ranks of comedy in New York now write for shows like this. Some of them actually work for this show. One of my good friends who's on my comedy in my improv group was a page at the David Letterman show, and boy, does he have stories. Woo! Most of these men, not all of them, but most of these men, or Ellen, any of them who pretend to be this fun, funny, cute, it's a shtick. They're usually some of the biggest bullies. So glad James Corden, or whatever that dude's name is, got exposed. But look at this. None of them would go on the record to talk, because that's the thing about Hollywood. And that's what I experienced when I was in it, just as a crew member. If someone sucks, you really can't talk about it because you don't want to get blacklisted. So even though there's unions to protect you, you don't want to get blacklisted, which is when everyone's like, yeah, don't hire that dude. He causes problems. Don't hire her. She's a troublemaker. By troublemaker, it means usually someone who holds people accountable and knows that they deserve better. I saw this tweet yesterday, because I remember this being a moment where I was like, fork this dude. And they're like, it was a small flippant moment, but Jimmy Fallon lost me when he normalized Donald Trump in 2006 playing with his hair. Do y'all remember that? This cute, funny, quirky man had on one of the most terrifying people in current U.S. history, right? Who we all knew was a grabbing essayer, a racist, right? Remember what he did to those kids in the Central Park 5, right? You know what I'm talking about? Google it. This man we knew who he was. We knew anybody who knows anything about dangerous right-wing people saw this coming. And Jimmy Fallon's like, come on my show, let's hang out and I just play with your hair, because yeah. I remember being so angry in that moment, like, what are you doing? First of all, why do you have him on the show? But what are you doing? So because that Jimmy Fallon is best friends with Justin Timberlake, I don't like that guy either. I don't trust him. Again, you are the company you keep, okay? Now, we saw what happened with Ashton and his buddy Danny. And it's so funny because I was actually going to make a video about this yesterday before I read this whole thing about Jimmy Fallon that came out with the Rolling Stones amazing investigative journalism. I was actually going to talk about this. Y'all remember this? When he had Nicole Kidman on? And she's all like, yeah, like your assistant or whatever was trying to hook me up with you, go on a date with you. So I went over to your house and you were wearing like a sweatpants and a baseball cap. And you were like, hey, what's up? And then you started playing video games. So I was like, and then she basically, I think she just left because she was like, what is this? Now that in itself is hilarious because that just goes to show you the entitlement of these men. Can you imagine having the audacity to be like Jimmy Fallon, who is not that big of a deal? He has his own show, but he's not even in the same category as Nicole Kidman. And he has Nicole Kidman come to his house. Like, Nicole, what are you doing, babe? What are you doing? That's not even a date. Why are you showing up at his house? So, like, let's take some lessons from Nicole. That Netflix and chill approach is not, you are not going to benefit from that. But she goes to his house. Can you imagine being so nonchalant, being like, oh, hey, and then going and putting on video games while this amazing star and talented woman and beautiful woman who is way out of your league, just ignoring her? Like, that just shows the entitlement of that. It's not just him being Jimmy, like immature. No, that's entitled Jimmy being like, what's up? Okay, I'm gonna just keep playing Mario Kart. But his reaction, while it was funny, was also disturbing. Because he was like, what? Like, he couldn't believe that happened. He was like, what, I almost got to date Nicole Kidman? The way he talked about it, I'm like, if I had been his wife, watching him respond that way, being like, oh my God, I missed a chance at dating and maybe marrying Nicole Kidman. Like, bro, hide your excitement a little bit. I cannot imagine being his wife watching that. Like, you know? I'm sure the Jimmy Fallon thing is going to get much worse, y'all. Because once a few people open that door where they finally feel safe to talk about these terrible dudes who are power hungry and predators. Oftentimes, I'm not talking about Jimmy. I'm talking about, because I don't know. I'm not going to make any accusations. But in general, these dudes, the Dannys and Ashton and Jonah Hill. By the way, I forgot to mention, in my last video, which I'm going to tag here and below in the caption, I'm talking about Ashton and his problematic stuff and how he had Jonah Hill on Punk'd. And the joke was feeding teenagers alcohol, like on a date kind of situation. But yeah, this Jonah who like abused her, you know what else he did? That the woman who was on that episode of Punk'd, well, she brought up this whole Punk'd episode with Jonah Hill and how everyone involved. By the way, I don't like Dax Shepard either. Anyone who is associated with that show is questionable to me. So this woman who called out all of these dudes on Punk'd in that episode also called out the predatory behavior of McFarlane from The Family Guy, which I have never been a fan of his. She called out Jonah Hill. She called out Justin Long, his roommate who was on CSI, apparently was, in his 40s or something, and assaulted her friend who was a teenager. She even threatened it. She was like, one day after I get enough therapy, Seth MacFarlane and his utter predatory, disrespectful professional boundaries, like warning shot, Betty. She's super angry, and that means she's got some stuff to say, but probably not ready to say it yet. She apparently started some sort of organization called Eat Predators, bring power to survivors to take down these men. Because apparently Jonah Hill took her out to get a cigarette. She wanted a cigarette, and he's like, I got a cigarette. Lured her out into the parking lot, grabbed a cigarette, didn't give it to her. When she finally asked for it before they went back inside, he pinned her against the wall and shoved his tongue down her throat. I'm telling y'all, pay close attention to the friends of the men that you trust. Because if they're hanging out with any man who is creepy, best case scenario, they're just cowards who can't cut them out or call them out. But more likely than that, they're a predator too.